you ask the question, how many people really understand this? It's probably just a few thousand, I would say. You can understand it, but you don't really understand it. It's only when you write about it that you go to another level of understanding it. I mean, the truth is there is no mental model because there has never been anything like Bitcoin in history. So it's very difficult to find an analogy or something to relate it to. If you look at something in a silo, you look at it just from its technology or just from its political aspect or just from its investment, you miss the big picture and then you might just reject it. In many ways, Bitcoin makes the original rationale for fiat redundant, because the only reason you moved away from gold was because of these shortcomings, all of which have been solved. All of that is fundamentally different from the foundational invention that is digital scarcity, and that is Bitcoin.
Hi, Vijay. How are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me, Robin. I've watched a few of your episodes. I really enjoy them. So very happy to be on and speaking to you.
Awesome. Maybe before we get into the topics, give the people a little bit of an overview of who you are and why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I'm a lawyer. I'm an attorney in the US and also a solicitor in the UK. I spent most of my career at Goldman Sachs in New York and then Hong Kong and Singapore. So I'm sort of very much from the traditional finance sort of world. Practiced as a lawyer in New York and London as well. And then I suppose currently I'm international general counsel at Gemini, based in London, and I cover sort of globally regulatory sort of matters, licensing, all that kind of thing. So why Bitcoin? I think I would say I started going down this rabbit hole a long time ago. I'd say maybe 2013 is when I first came across Bitcoin. It's been a long journey in rejecting it first, and then somewhat reluctantly starting to learn about it, and then finally really going down that rabbit hole. So I think it was probably around 2021 that I decided, okay, I'd like to be in the space kind of more full time. So I left Goldman and I moved into the space sort of thing. And it was around then that I started writing as well in this space. And the culmination of all of that is this book that Columbia University Press is actually officially publishing only next month, although it's already out on Amazon. But yeah, it's this book, Principles of Bitcoin, that I wrote. Yeah.
Super interesting. And I'm like, I think always people that write books have gone, because I'm trying to myself to write a book currently, and I completely underestimated how hard this is actually to write the things down that you already know, and you kind of want to have it in a condensed form on some pages. That's really hard. Why did you decide to write a book? Is this your first one, or is it just the first one in Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I mean, I never actually intended to write a book. That's the funny thing. It wasn't that, okay, I want to write a book. What do I write about? Let me write about Bitcoin. That's not how it happened. I wrote a paper about Bitcoin in 2020. And then on the back of that, I thought, okay, I want to build on this a little bit more. And then so I sent what I wrote to some publishers, and they really liked it. They asked me to develop on some aspects of it. And so it was initially a 10-page, paper. It was not even 10 pages. And then I wrote a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And before I knew it, I had a sort of 320-page book. So that's how it just happened. It wasn't something that I planned or, sort of wanted to do since I was a child or something like that. It's just kind of just happened. But in terms of the process, it's a very rewarding process. So if you're looking at writing a book, you should definitely do it. I think I don't know if I've heard someone saying this, it might have been Safe Dean or someone else. You never really understand something until you write about it or teach it, because it's only that process of essentially synthesizing the material when you actually learn it. Just listening to something on a podcast or reading about it, you can understand it, but you don't really understand it. It's only when you write about it that you go to another level of understanding it. So it's an extremely rewarding experience.
What have you learned about Bitcoin in the process of writing about Bitcoin?
Sure. So, I mean, my focus has been because I come from this traditional finance world, right? I've spent my entire career in this space, sort of lawyer, banker sort of thing. Um, I kind of understand how people think about this coming from the outside, coming from the traditional world. So what really interested me when I finally got it and I sort of really understood what Bitcoin was, what really interested me was, why is it so hard to understand? Why do people, particularly from the traditional world, why do they find it so difficult to understand what this is? And I mean, there's plenty of reasons for that. I mean, it's, kind of, some people are just, you're just lazy, sort of you can't be bothered to spend the time reading about something and trying to understand it. It's also, a lot of people are just very arrogant, sort of intellectually arrogant about legacy finance. You go to someone, sort of a very successful private equity guy or a, hedge fund manager who's made tens of millions or hundreds of millions, maybe billions, on his, through his investments in the traditional world, traditional financial world, and tell him, what, you've missed this. You're not going to get a very, this sort of, you take Jamie Dimon or, someone who's the king of Wall Street, you tell him you've completely missed this. He's not going to react very well to it. So there's also that kind of ego sort of aspect to it. But what I think is, but sort of saying someone is lazy or arrogant doesn't really help. So, but if you look at it from the perspective of, okay, what is the right mental model to use to think about Bitcoin? And that is something that I really struggle with. And I mean, the truth is there is no mental model because there has never been anything like Bitcoin in history. So it's very difficult to find an analogy or something to relate it to. And so my goal in writing this book was to try to come up with that kind of a mental model. And I looked at it from two perspectives. One was I wanted to really take it from a first principles perspective. So really asking the question, just hang on a minute. Let's not talk about blockchain and crypto and, metaverse and Web3 and all of that. What was the core innovation of Satoshi? What is this all about? Right. So you answer that question. And then the second aspect of it was you've got to look at it holistically. You can't, I mean, human beings are programmed to look at things holistically, the big picture. If you look at something in a silo, you look at it just from its technology or just from its political aspect or just from its investment, thesis, you miss the big picture and then you might just reject it. So looking at it holistically was the other thing. So that's why my book is Principles of Bitcoin: Technology, Economics, Politics, and Philosophy. So I argue that you've got to look at it from all these four angles. There are many more angles, but I've just made a start with these four. You've got to look at it from these four aspects, and that's a path to understanding it better. So that was kind of what I tried. That was the lens through which I tried to approach the explanation.
Interesting. There are really a lot of interesting things in there. I also I said that I think like last week or something like that, where I was guest on a podcast. Like what's basically holding Bitcoin back, and I was like, people that don't understand Bitcoin are either arrogant or lazy, or just ignorant. They hear about it, but they just like push it aside for a moment. They're like, I don't want to deal with that now. I don't want to. And then they maybe build an opinion just because they read something in a headline, and then they adopt that opinion, even though they never really look deeper. And I think we as Bitcoin educators really have to fight against those misinformations out there, or these different opinions. And we have to fight in this digital information warfare that's currently. So I'm so grateful for every educator, content creator, author, blog article writer, whatever you are doing. Like every single piece of content helps in this educational war.
Yeah, there's this Twitter meme. Bitcoin is an IQ test, right? You might have seen that. I don't think that's true, because I mean there are plenty of people in traditional finance who are exceptionally smart. I mean their IQs would be significantly higher than some of the smartest Bitcoiners, but they don't get it. And the reason for that is it's not intelligence or IQ or anything. It's just that they're not open-minded. So I like to say Bitcoin is not an IQ test. It's an open-mindedness test. It's a test of how intellectually honest you are, how intellectually humble you are as well, and open-minded to new ideas, and to accept that maybe you got it wrong, maybe you missed something here. Just having the ability to come to terms with that. I think it's a test of that. It's not an IQ test.
Yeah, this ego death, because like almost every Bitcoiner heard about Bitcoin a few years before they first bought Bitcoin, and then you have to say, "Oh yeah, I missed it. I missed it 3 years ago, and now I have to buy a higher price." That's kind of the thing that most people have to go through.
Yeah, there's another meme which is everybody buys Bitcoin at the price they deserve. Right? It sounds a bit biblical and kind of Old Testament-y, but there's some truth there, right? You sort of it's only when you accept that you might have missed it, you might have got it wrong. That's when the actual learning and the kind of journey begins. So yeah.
Is there something else that you think Bitcoin is holding back currently? I mean, today maybe is a bad day to ask that, because we're at a new all-time high at the time of the recording. But is there something that you feel like Bitcoin should be higher, but it's not higher because like we haven't done this, or like there's this thing that needs to happen before we enter a new adoption rate or new price level?
I think it's just people coming, like, understanding it, right? Yeah. So as you pointed out, I think education. I think the truth is that there's all these statistics that there's 150 million people who own Bitcoin, and all of that. That means nothing, right? Like a lot of them are just someone who just opened a Coinbase account and got a $10 reward in Bitcoin, and so they're one of the 150 million. Right? They might not know anything about Bitcoin other than how to spell it or something, right? So those statistics mean nothing. If you ask the question, how many people really understand this, right? It's probably just a few thousand, I would say. I cannot imagine that more than 50,000 people actually truly understand Bitcoin currently in the world, which is just minuscule, right? And I said there's several reasons for that, some of which we just talked about, but I think that's what's holding it back, and that is going to be the journey. But it's just how it is, right? That's just the natural path of adoption, and you just have to go with it. It's it's the laws of the jungle. It's the laws of nature. It's people who are who have that curiosity, who want to go out there and explore. They will be the earlier adopters, and the laggards will come in at a much later date, right? That's just the natural progression. But in terms of, it's what's holding it back, I think, we need more education resources. We need, and I also believe that crypto has confused it a lot when people conflate Bitcoin with Trump coin or Doge and Pepe and all these other, or monkey JPEGs, Bored Apes and NFTs and all of that. Fine. I mean, I don't, no judgment. If you want to do that, that's great. But it's not Bitcoin. None of those are disrupting monetary policy. None of those are making any claim to being money. But when the general public look at these things, they look at everything under the umbrella of crypto, and for them, it's all the same thing, right? So I think that is also a huge reason why I think it still remains so misunderstood.
Interesting. I really want to get your take on altcoins also a little bit later. But it's super interesting to also see the natural selection of people and how they get it and how they don't get it. And I'm always really impressed with people that worked in the traditional financial space and get Bitcoin. Yeah. Because the incumbent system that works in that very system that gets revolutionized or gets a paradigm shift, this is usually the people that get it the least because they're inside the system and they cannot see outside of the system. They're too deep inside. But there are instances of bankers, of people that work in banking in different sections, like you as a lawyer, also like, but marketing, but in banking in general, that, or investment banking, they actually get it. They're like, oh, wait, there's this Bitcoin thing, and this explains so many things that wasn't making sense in the thing that I actually worked in. How did you, like, what was the moment for you where you realized, oh shit, like Bitcoin makes sense for me?
So I was a gold investor. So I'm, I was a lawyer during the 2008 financial crisis. Pre 2008, I worked on CDOs, CDSs, all the things that caused the crisis. I worked on the Lehman. I worked on bailout, packages for Morgan Stanley and so on. I was very much involved in that. Not bailout, but the TARP. It was Troubled Asset Repurchase Program in 2008. I was very much part of that whole crisis. So in the aftermath of that, I really got into gold, and I could see the flaws in the monetary system, the central banking system. It was very evident to me, and so and the death of the free market. Right? It was very apparent when all the things that were happening in 2008. I didn't hear about Bitcoin in 2008 or 2009. I don't think many people did. It was just happening somewhere in a corner of the internet. But I went down the gold path, and so I invested in gold back then. And I don't know if you follow gold prices. It was just a decade of. It was a painful decade for gold investors. It just went nowhere, and you had the stock market going up to the moon, and gold just went nowhere. But to answer your question, that's the mindset. I kind of could see the flaws in the system, in the monetary system, but I didn't know where to go. And so gold seemed the most obvious one. So for me, it was an easy jump. All I needed to do, I understood the economics of it. I understood the monetary policy aspects of the Bitcoin story. What I needed was the technology piece, just to understand digital gold, just to understand that, the 21 million absolute scarcity, how that's achieved in the digital realm. Those are big leaps, right? And you don't get it from just a few hours of study. It takes 1,000 hours to truly understand digital scarcity. I believe that it's been the case with me. So that's kind of, that leap, I think, occurred over several years. And it was just a question of, reading about it, questioning it, rejecting it, coming back to it, and I'm grateful to many of those educators that I had the good fortune to be exposed to back then. Yeah.
It's now. One thing is for sure, like there's now so many great educators already in the space. When you look back, let's say, I don't know, to 2017, which was a really big spike, the Bitcoin standard of Cyberdean was not even out. The Bitcoin only content creator space, there was like rarely podcasts, rarely daily YouTube shows, anything like that. I think Ben from BTC Sessions already made videos, but it was not that much also. So if you come in 2025 into the Bitcoin ecosystem, you can get orange pilled within weeks because you have so much content out there and it's so good that's digestible. If you get in like 2017, you need a long time to sift through all the noise.
100%, yeah. I mean, I think people like Trace Meyer, I don't know if you came across it, he like some of his podcasts were very helpful. And then later on, I think GG was a big one of those moments for me when I really got it, particularly his explanation of map is the territory. I don't know if you've read that. He wrote a paper called Bitcoin is Time. If you haven't read it, it's available on his website and various others. But he talks about this idea that it's essentially peer-to-peer transactions is the laws of physics applying in the digital realm. and he talks about map is the map is the territory. When you have say gold-backed certificates, the gold is the territory, and the certificates are the map, right? And so they're separate. And the reason you have the separation is to solve problems of portability, transferability, transactability, and divisibility, and all of verifiability and such things. But with Bitcoin, it's the record itself is the asset. So the map is the territory. It is those types of things, sort of that were, for me, they were very, very critical moments in the sort of light bulb going off. Yeah.
Do you also think, because you mentioned gold, that you got gold and then it was an easier jump to Bitcoin? Do you think because of that reason, because gold is so close to the value proposition of Bitcoin, that gold might be the first asset that gets demonetized in a big way against Bitcoin and kind of gets more and more to the utility value of what gold is and less about the monetary premium that it holds?
Yeah, I think so. It's possible. But the thing is that you look where, Indian families and Chinese families own, I think most of the gold in the world, or, sort of a very large share of it. You're not going to be able to educate, go to a random Indian family in a middle class Indian community and say, give me your gold jewels and I'll give you this magic internet money. It's a much, much harder journey. So I think it'll take a while for gold to get demonetized. I don't see that as being the progression. I think I think treasuries, government bonds, the bond market will be the first one to fall victim, and then perhaps other asset classes. Yeah.
Yeah, I have an Indian girlfriend, so I understand how manifested gold is in their culture and how important it is, also with marriages and gifting gold and giving it from generation to generation. It's fascinating how anchored it is. But it was because of that reason that it was really easy actually for my girlfriend over time to understand Bitcoin, and she's now all in Bitcoin. So maybe that's a good thing if they understand gold. It will take time, of course, to get away from gold, but the network effects are really strong of gold. But it will happen over time and long enough exposure to Bitcoin content.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that gold only has a market cap of $20 billion, right? You think about if the, and this is where there is a little bit of a cognitive issue. If you think about, you say that Bitcoin's biggest selling point is its scarcity. Then on the basis of scarcity, gold should have a much, much bigger market cap, but it doesn't, right? Like, why hasn't gold disrupted more of the monetary premium that fiat has, right? And the reason for that is obviously lack of portability, divisibility, verifiability, all those other constraints that gold has suffered, which was the basis for fiat money's, introduction and evolution. And Bitcoin makes all those reasons redundant because it's more portable than fiat. It's more divisible. It's divisible. It's more verifiable. It is superior. So it kind of, in many ways, Bitcoin makes the original rationale for fiat redundant. There's no rationale for its existence any longer, because the only reason you moved away from gold was because of these shortcomings, all of which have been solved. So that's an interesting kind of, that's one kind, explanation that I found quite helpful to explain to people when they say, no, it's okay. So what, gold is 8,000 years. It's been around for 8,000 years. And why isn't it more than, 20 billion market cap? Why did people abandon it? The fact that people abandon it demonstrates that it can never be money. So Bitcoin can never be money. But this is the reason. It's because of these shortcomings, the absence of spatial salability, which is what Carl Menger not, father of Austrian economics, talked about. So yeah, Bitcoin solves those problems.
I love that. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. It's the best of both worlds. It's combining fiat and gold kind of together, and also have some even some values from real estate and other store of values if you look closer. But coming to the question that I had about you being a lawyer, how do you actually look at all those tokens and securities and altcoins that are kind of generated with pumped on fun and then all those meme coins from a law perspective? We as like a Bitcoin maxi like myself, we are sometimes very quick in calling them a scam and calling them, like why do you give your money to them? I mean, there are like levels to that. There's like Ethereum, Cardano, but then there's like real like complete meme coins that don't even have they don't even try to give any utility, not questioning. Like I also don't see the utility of other altcoins, but at least Ethereum and Cardano, they're kind of trying to give some utility. How do you look at some of the meme coins and projects that are just starting out? They kind of get money from the open market without registering with the Security Exchange Commission. I mean, I think Gary Gensler was his name, who kind of tried that, but now with Trump coming in on his own token, this kind of vanished now. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I can't say too much about that. I mean, I'll just say that I think there's the distinction that most people don't get, which is what I earlier explained, is money versus everything else. And I don't think there's been any, if anyone tells you that Cardano is the next, we're going to go move on to the Cardano standard or the Ethereum standard, that's nonsensical. But sure, they I'm not going to comment on the utility of those tokens. In terms of regulation, I mean, I'm a big believer in the free market. If someone wants to trade something, go ahead and trade it. If you lose money, then you learn the hard way. And, that's just how kind of the law of the jungle works, right? I have nothing against people going to the casino and spinning the roulette wheel. So if you want to trade some meme coin, go ahead and do it. That's not for me to decide. I don't think it's for the state even, frankly, to decide what you can and can't be doing. I mean, that's for people to exercise their own independent judgment and, make an investment decision. So I'm all for the free market, sifting out these bad actors, and sure, some people get burned along the way, but that's just how life is,
I like that answer because it's actually a journey that I've went through, where before I started the podcast, I was only on Twitter and I was really, I don't want to say toxic, but I was really aggressive against all the altcoins. And now I'm just saying, I don't care about them. they can do whatever they want, and I just focus on Bitcoin only. And I went through that journey because of free market, of the free market learnings and lessons that I had with Austrian economics and everything, because I was like, Bitcoin is the ultimate winner in a free market. So if we make sure we have the freest market possible, Bitcoin will win out against everything else. So I should never argue for a regulatory body to crack down on crypto or altcoins or shitcoins, whatever you want to call them, because that makes the market less free. And I think Bitcoin will be the winner in a free market. So I should always argue for a more free market. And it's sad that people lose money in crypto schemes, but it's also their fault. It's their money. Like if they're over 18 years old and they make with their own money, their own decisions, it's life. Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there.
Right, yeah. And the issue is when the state intervenes and you have this nanny state of trying to curate everything and all of that, people stop thinking for themselves. And then they look for somebody else to blame, when in fact you're the one to blame. if you didn't exercise the necessary judgment and do the necessary work before you invested your money, you're the one to blame. You have to take responsibility for your actions rather than try to blame somebody else. So yeah, that's just how I look at it.
You posed a really interesting question when you explained how you went ahead and wrote the book with the holistic view and the different angles. And I heard in a German speaking area a really interesting presentation on Bitcoin from Florian. He went ahead and I think he took like 30 minutes and went through different professions and different people and how they look at Bitcoin. And he came up with a different explanation for them for each different perspective. So it's super interesting how many different angles and perspectives and ways to explain Bitcoin is. But then the question is like, what is the holistic view of Bitcoin? Like, what is the bigger picture of all of that combined? And that's super interesting. So I like that you posed that question. How did you go ahead and kind of answer that in the book? And how did you what is kind of your conclusion to that?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I think in terms of mental models, I argue that the easiest mental model, if you were to do an elevator pitch, right, the 30-second, how do you explain, like, what is Bitcoin? Sort of just 30 seconds, how do you explain it? And it's a very difficult thing to do because as you know, there's never existed anything like it. There's nothing automatically to relate it to. And so the problem is, because there's nothing to relate it to, people try to fit a square peg in a round hole, and then it just doesn't work. But I think one model that kind of works is the most famous, well-known model, which is digital gold. And it's funny. I mean, as you said, there's so much that's been written about Bitcoin now. There's volumes and volumes, libraries of explanations on what it is, and like thousands of hours of podcasts and recordings. But it's quite interesting that almost all the questions about Bitcoin are answered in some way by Satoshi's original emails or, sort of his messages. And my all-time favorite quote of Satoshi is that particular email where he says that as a thought experiment, imagine you have a dull gray. Do you know that one? A dull gray metal. It's not malleable. It's not it's not shiny or beautiful like gold or anything like that. But it has one special property, which is that it can be transported across a communication channel, right? So that is Bitcoin. And I think that is the perfect explanation of Bitcoin. So if you think about Bitcoin as literally a rock, and I have this thought experiment in the book where I talk about, just imagine a meteorite like this rock lands on Earth from another galaxy, another constellation in outer space. That entire galaxy is now being devoured by a black hole, right? So this last remaining rock is the only fragment that exists in the universe. You'll never have more of this particular rock. And you have it here now on Earth. And the rock has all these magical properties. For one, it can be divided into a quadrillion equally sized, particles. You can take the particles, and if you like whisper a magic word to it, it becomes invisible. You can hand the particle to somebody else. You can throw the particle to someone on the other side of the planet, and they just reach out and they catch it, right? And it's invisible. Nobody can see it. It just you can transport it without anybody confiscating it. Do you think that rock would have any value? And if you ask some sort of, person who doesn't know anything about Bitcoin, they probably say, yeah, that seems like a pretty amazing, a magical rock from outer space. And it's scarce. It's absolutely scarce as well. Would that be of any value? It would absolutely be of value. That is literally what Bitcoin is, right? It is completely peer-to-peer. It is, dematerialized. You can transport it. If you're being persecuted by an authoritarian state, you can move across borders without anybody knowing that you're carrying potentially millions of dollars or more, in your mind. So I sort of argue that is actually a really helpful mental model, kind of almost like a very first principles based explanation for what Bitcoin is. It's a physical, it's kind of like the invention. What was the invention? The invention was the creation of a material that, is a physical material that lives on the internet. Yeah, so that I think is the best explanation that I could come up with for what Bitcoin is, and so I in addition to that, I say that, but you have to understand it from different realms. You have to if you just focus on the price alone and the economics of it, you miss the political implications. You miss what a censorship resistant permissionless asset does in an authoritarian state, sort of in Iran or North Korea, or Venezuela, what a lifeline it gives populations in those parts of the world. If you focus only on its political aspects without understanding the technology that gives it censorship resistance and permissionlessness and unconfiscatability, then you'll think, some government is going to shut it down. It's pointless. It's a fool's errand, right? And equally, if you focus just on the technology without understanding the philosophy and the politics and the economics of it, then you're going to think, this is outdated technology. I'm going to move on to the next, faster blockchain or whatever, right? If you don't understand all these other aspects of it. So that's why you need to look at it holistically to really get it. Yeah.
It makes total sense, and it's a great comparison to make people understand that Bitcoin is the best way to communicate value across space and time. And that's basically what money should be. You want to communicate value across space and across time. And that, like, those two things have to be perfect or close to perfect, or the best thing that we currently have. And at that time, Bitcoin is that. And the great thing is that 99% of the people haven't figured it out. So you can capitalize on 99% of the people figuring it out in the next 10, 20, 100 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the greatest. Someone wrote, I don't know if it was Alex Gladstein or maybe someone else. It's one of the greatest informational asymmetries. If you look at the knowledge that Bitcoiners have, people who understand Bitcoin and are proponents of Bitcoin have about it, compared to the knowledge that Bitcoin skeptics have, it's a vast asymmetry. I've never met a person who can truly explain to me, the difficulty adjustment or like even the difference between a miner and a node runner, who is also a really, really like a real skeptic of Bitcoin. It's very, very rare to see that, and so that's a major asymmetry.
I've never met the person that actually understands Bitcoin and has no agenda against Bitcoin and still is critical against Bitcoin. Like, if you have no agenda and you have and you're informed about Bitcoin, you almost have to be at least positive towards it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, some people who've just kind of sold the bottoms of cycles, they tend to also be, so even if they truly understand it, they can't accept that they lost so much money on it. I mean, it's painful if you bought Bitcoin at 30,000, sold it at 16,000, sold it all at 16,000, and then you watch it go back up to 100,000. It's a painful experience.
But I would say if you truly understand Bitcoin, you wouldn't sell.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. But you can understand it enough to know what a node is and a miner is and what is the difficulty adjustment and all of that, but not really, really get it. And again, I think it comes down to the holistic perspective, right? You can understand these little things, the technology of it, over a weekend, but to understand the full picture takes a lot more time.
Absolutely, and it's also painful if you bought the top and sold the bottom, and then you still watch the asset, you still maybe consume one or two podcasts and books, and then you're like, the price keeps rising, and it's like not 60K anymore, it's like 50K or like 60 or 70K, and you're like more and more like, oh shit, like I shouldn't have sold. Like, I now have more and more understand the thing, and then it's like at 110K, and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to, do you have the humility to accept that, you got it wrong?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting. How do you look actually at this bull market? It's fascinating for me that we have so much great news, but the price is kind of disappointing. Again, we are recording that on like 22nd of May. When this comes out, it's probably like mid of June, so the price might be not as disappointing anymore, or more disappointing. Let's see.
Yeah, look, I think all these charts, and I think, technical analysis, TA, is just astrology. I don't attribute any value to technical analysis. But I do think that M2 supply, M2 money is probably, out of all the indicators, I think that is the most reliable indicator. And the lagging M2 supply, I think, is a pretty reliable indicator. It's not just Bitcoin; it's all asset prices, right? It's a stock market. I don't see a scenario, at least for the time being, where there's a complete decoupling of Bitcoin from other risk assets, simply because, like we discussed, 99% of the world doesn't understand it. So, for a while to come, a lot of money will continue to trade it as if it's a risk asset. There's no getting around that. It just, I mean, learning takes time, adoption takes time. So I think it'll continue to trade in that way. So if you follow M2 supply, I think it's broadly following. It's on track. I mean, it's there's been a spike in M2. Bitcoin is now starting to catch up to that. So yeah, I think it's all as per schedule. I don't think it's really that much out of whack. It's just about patience. I think you just have to kind of wait for the process to unfold.
We before talked about how much we can learn from the early Satoshi emails, and I know we don't know who Satoshi is, and it's kind of hard to think of like what he would have think about Bitcoin right now. But what do you think is your best guess? Like what Satoshi would say, how satisfied or dissatisfied he would be with the current developments of Bitcoin?
I'd say he'd be extremely satisfied, right? There's Alan Farrington. Have you read Bitcoin is Venice?
I did not read that.
It's a good book, but there's this. I'm probably going to butcher it, but there's this. I think he ends one of the chapters with this. He says, like what I think there's two people talking about the sun, the earth going around the sun, and someone says, are you sure the earth goes around the sun, revolves around the sun? It doesn't seem like the earth is revolving around the sun. And the other guy asks him, what do you think it would seem like if it seemed like the earth was going around the sun? And that's like it would seem exactly like this, right? This is how it would seem. So if you ask yourself, what would it seem like if an asset, a brand new technological innovation, was monetizing from absolute zero to become, the global reserve asset? What would it look like? It might look a lot like this. It's going to be volatile. The process is going to be slow. It's going to be misunderstood, misconstrued. But the march of adoption will continue. So yeah, I think Satoshi would be quite pleased with the way things have panned out.
I do think so too, and it's interesting because when we think about the Earth is around the sun or the sun is around the Earth, it's like when you stand on Earth because it's going up and down, you think it's like, oh yeah, like it's obvious, the sun is around the Earth. But then you look deeper, and the same thing with Bitcoin. The first thing is like, oh, like it uses so much energy, it goes up and down so much, it's volatile. Like, why would you, like, it's only for gamblers if you look out from the outside and you don't look deeper. But then you look deeper and you're like, oh, there's more. Oh, it's actually perfect money. So you have to look deeper at things and longer at things before you really get it, especially if something is new coming. So I think I love the sun analogy also a lot.
Yeah. And it's also another thing that I talk about in the book is this is foundational inventions, and I think this comes back to the point about Bitcoin versus altcoins. If you take what is a foundational invention is an invention that's complete from inception. So the wheel, for example, is a foundational invention. Right. There was you can have different materials, or, you can have it in wood or steel or rubber or something else. But the wheel is, an axle and wheels is the same principle that you see every single vehicle, running on the road. It's a foundational invention. The magnetic compass is also a foundational invention. But you compare that to, for example, the automobile, right? You had the first automobile. I think Carl Benz in Germany created a prototype, and then Ford created the assembly line, and then you've had all sort of iterations over decades, culminating in electric cars and self-driving cars and so on. And similar to that, you take the light bulb or the smartphones or computers and so on. Like they're constantly evolving, right? They were never complete at the time of invention. So which category does Bitcoin fall into? Is it a foundational invention like the wheel, or is it like the automobile? And many people think, and this has been a big problem since 2009, they thought that this was just the initial starting point, blockchain technology, and then all these things it's going to evolve and get built on and so on, like the automobile or like computers. They don't realize that the underlying concept, which is digital scarcity, is a one-time invention. It is the wheel, not the automobile. And I think that is something that, again, goes to differentiate Bitcoin from all the other things in crypto, right? Sure, maybe they're going to serve purposes. And I'm sure, stable coins, I think, is the most, valuable innovation to come out of the crypto ecosystem. And there may be others. I'm not dismissing any of that. But all of that is fundamentally different from the foundational invention that is digital scarcity, and that is Bitcoin. And I think that's a distinction that is lost on most people. And so I've tried to explain that in my writing.
I love that. I never heard the term foundational innovation in that context. I really like that. From inception, it's complete, and therefore it's fundamentally different to the smartphone or social media or all those things. It's more like the TCP/IP protocol or like the wheel. I love the wheel comparison because it's like the wheel never really changed. It just got different things on top of it, and maybe there's comparable with the layer 2 where it has different versions of it.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like, this is not to say that you should not be. I mean, there will be changes. I mean, all this sort of OP return and all these conversations that are ongoing. Of course, we'll most likely need a soft fork to address quantum computing at some point over the next few years. But the core innovation is digital scarcity. And that goes so much beyond. It's not just some lines of C++ code, right? It's everything else. It's the 100,000 plus nodes around the world, the billions of dollars of mining equipment distributed around the world, the decentralization at multiple levels. It's the adoption that's taken place. It's the network effects. It's the Lindy effect. All of that coming together is what makes it digitally scarce. That's what contributes to the 21 million digital scarcity, the incentive structure around, and that's what sets it apart from everything else.
I love that. I also saw that I think Alex Gladstein wrote the foreword for your book, if I remember correctly. And he does tremendous work of the impact of Bitcoin from outside the financial aspect, outside of the number go up store of value side, and more of the social impact of that Bitcoin has. How do you look at the impact that Bitcoin will have outside of, you probably get wealthy from it?
Yeah, no, so that's kind of like I said, that's the political side of my explanation. You have to understand that to understand it holistically. And you're right. I mean, if you go to most people and tell them, if you use human rights and Bitcoin in the same sentence, they look at you like you're from outer space. It's just, it would make no sense to them, right? So that was the reason why I asked Alex Gladstein to write the foreword, because he's chief strategy officer at the Human Rights Foundation, and this is what he does. So I'm sure it shocks a lot of people to see someone from the human rights world write a foreword about Bitcoin, right? But I wanted that, but yeah, I think personally, I think that is its biggest, its most impactful aspect will be the human rights angle. In fact, I think the relationship between violence, war, and Bitcoin is one of the most underappreciated aspects of Bitcoin. Right? If you look at the history of conflict, all wars have been fought over either defense or trying to acquire physical property, physical resources. The resource curse is a term you might have heard. Like parts of the world that had abundant resources have been the greatest victims of conquests, right? You take Africa, India, and so on, European conquests, and South America, and so on. It's always been humans in seeking physical wealth, physical resources that has resulted in violence, perpetration of terrible acts of violence throughout history for tens of thousands of years. Now, what happens if you dematerialize property, right? And you make it. This is something that Trace Meyer, actually, the first time I heard this was from Trace Meyer, where he says that you make it uneconomic. It's just there's no return on investment if you invest in trying to take away or sort of conquer somebody else and take their property, because it's impossible now. What does that do to societies, civilizations? I think it remains to be seen, and I think it's going to be tremendously impactful. Just the simple dematerialization of physical property, I think, is profound.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to see the full impact of Bitcoin in that regard, because it is, we are so early in the first 15 years of this revolution. And if you just think back of the first 15 years of anything, you have no clue what the next 15, 20 years will bring. When we look at when the first internet protocols and the first connected networks came across, let's say in 1990 or that era, you had no clue that 20 years later, there's like a YouTube, there is zooming around the world, there's Google that makes it easy. And then zoom another 15 years later, we have now AI where you can speak towards, and it is like a personal assistant that knows everything about the world and is actually really good in digesting information, helping you with tasks, and then take this and take it another 15 years out. It's scary how fast those things really develop. And because we are in the moment, it's really hard for us to understand how quick this actually is happening, because it seems slow. But look at the AI videos of Will Smith 2 years ago eating spaghettis, and look at the AI videos that Google just released, this view model, and it's freakingly good. Like that is movie material that you can do now with AI. Just look in 5 years. You have no clue if that's AI Robin or real Robin that sits here. Like you have just no way of knowing, because AI is so good. I can guarantee you that already. It will be a really fun time for content creators.
Yeah, no, it's 100%, 100%. Yeah, and it's that's why I think Bitcoin is a very interesting counterpoint to AI in a world where you're not going to know what is real in the digital realm of ones and zeros. Here you have something that you can hold on to, which you can actually trade as if it were physical property, yet in the digital realm. Is that very interesting counterpoint to AI?
I also, it's really interesting when you think about an AI, a post AI world, or like an actual AI world where you can copy anything and it looks super real. We will have to make somehow sure how to verify that this is from a real person. And I think real person things will be a lot more valuable than anything else, because people really probably, they probably will get so sick from all the AI content that the human content and the human touch of things will be so freaking valuable, because it's like such a small portion of the overall internet. So I'm just so grateful to be alive at that very time. Honestly, it's like AI, Bitcoin, and there's like 1,000 other things that I'm excited about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think AI is gonna, sort of, you're not going to be able to trust anything that you see online, and that's such a big shift from, this old sort of thing, like, post a photo or it didn't happen. That used to be a thing, right? But now it's, posting a photo doesn't mean it happened. There's no value whatsoever. So we've moved into that, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. You go back before the internet and the digital era of sharing photos and so on. We lived in darkness. The world was kind of because you couldn't see, you had to get physical analog photos sent to you in the mail, and you don't know what your family members or your friends are doing in another part of the world or whatever. It was kind of a dark place to be, right? Because you couldn't see things to digital photography. And now we went through this, 20+ years of Instagram and seeing all these amazing things, amazing photos, and seeing what was happening around the world. And now we've, in a weird way, come back to darkness again, because you cannot trust. You see all these things, but you don't know what is real. So it's a weird kind of paradoxical thing. It's like we're going to be cast once again into darkness in, in not being able to trust anything that is online.
Yeah, and in a weird way, it might really value up the physical experiences, like going. I think we talked about before we're going to the Vegas conference, and it's like you really value those because this is like a true way of knowing, hey, this person is real. Maybe at some point the robots can be so freaking good that you don't even know in real life. Wait, are you even real? Like, like how do you prove that?
I don't think hardware. So they say that people always overestimate the speed at which hardware gets adopted and underestimate the speed at which software gets adopted. So hardware, I don't think robots are just suddenly going to take over everything. It's because it's hardware, it's physical. You need to roll out. You can't just produce like 1 million robots and roll them out, right? Whereas software, you just create something, Copilot, and every single, Microsoft PC on the planet has Copilot installed, right? That is the speed at which software can be adopted. So we always underestimate that and overestimate hardware. So I don't really see robots taking over the world, but certainly, everything online is going to be changed very, very radically.
Yeah, that's very true. I have one question to ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Well, I'm a lawyer, and I'm a structured finance derivatives person. That's what I've done for the last 20 years. So if you want to learn about what happened in the 2008 financial crisis, The Big Short, if you want to understand, the movie The Big Short, and sort of the book as well about that by Aaron Sorkin. I can talk about that because I was there and I did that stuff myself. So that's yeah.
Pretty cool. We have an routine. I mean, the Big Short is always super interesting because there's so many. I think the movie, for example, the Big Short is kind of a Bitcoiner movie for me. It's always like when you're a Bitcoiner, you're like, oh, it's relatable.
Yeah, I think the Matrix and the Big Short are maybe the top two Bitcoiner movies. Maybe V for Vendetta as well. Maybe.
Oh man, I haven't seen that. I have to look at that. I think some people already mentioned that.
It's more of a cypherpunk kind of world thing. It's not necessarily, it's V for Vendetta is the Guy Fawkes, sort of the Mask. It's Natalie Portman. It's a good movie. Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. And we have an end routine in the podcast, as you probably know, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, what's one way that Bitcoin can change the world that most people don't talk about?
I think it's the one I just talked about. I think the impact on war and violence that arises from the dematerialization of property, I think, is the most underestimated aspect of Bitcoin. Nobody talks about it. People talk about inflation, sure, store of value, sure. But whatever peer-to-peer transfers, privacy, and all those things, sure. But I think far more important, far more impactful, I think, will be its impact on literally on wars and on violence. I think that's kind of how I would see it.
Yeah, it's something that it's not on top of the minds that get interested in Bitcoin because they see the number go up, technology. They see like, oh, I get wealthy, or I've saved 4,000 euros now. I have like 6,000, and those smaller things. But this ending or limiting physical wars and having something immaterial, and also the thing that you can have it yourself, and people can show up to your house and you can still not give it to them. So you can set Bitcoin up in a way, no matter with like maybe time locks or multi-signature or however you do it, that people can break in your house and can torture you, and you can say to them, you can kill me, you can torture me, but one thing I cannot do is give you my Bitcoin because I've set it up in a way that I just can't. so super sorry to say. And this is completely changing the way of like, hey, you can hold a lot of wealth and secure it in your own way and be safe with that. And that's like, it's freaking awesome.
Yeah. And it's just good privacy practices. You don't be going around telling people. And you can actually legitimately lose your Bitcoin, right? I mean, if you actually, even if you're not doing the boating accident, like pretending to have lost it, it is so easy to lose like a piece of paper or your private keys, and you've lost your Bitcoin. And so nobody can really you're the only one who actually knows whether or not you have your Bitcoin. And that's a very, very, paradigm shifting, concept, from, okay, here's my suitcase filled with gold that I have buried in my backyard, and if, you're under some kind of attack or you need to flee, you can't take it with you most of the time, right? So in my book, I have this thought experiment. It's a what if scenario. So what if, you run through different wars through history, let's say the Second World War. What if the Jews had, this kind of, an invisible asset that they could just take with them across borders? What if people under Soviet communism had, this kind of unconfiscatable, censorship-resistant way of transacting? So, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's a really good one. I like that. Perfect. Then thank you so much. Before I let you go, I can let you go, where can people reach out to you and DM you and ask you questions?
I have a Twitter account, so maybe that's the best. So it's Vijay Selvam XO. That's the handle. Yeah.
Perfect. And thank you so much, Vijay, for taking the time. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.